I never imagined the day our house caught fire would be the beginning of the end of my marriage. It started innocently enough, or as innocent as a tragedy can be. A faulty electrical wire sparked while we were out, turning the home we'd built for 10 years into a smoldering wreck. By the time we arrived, there was nothing left but ashes and smoke curling into the evening sky. My wife, Emily, cried harder than I'd ever seen her cry before. I held her, not knowing what else to do. I told her, "We'll rebuild," over and over again, but her sobs only grew louder. Maybe she knew, on some level, that it wasn't just our house that had gone up in flames. Our neighbors, Mike and Karen, were the first to show up at the scene. Mike patted my back while Karen wrapped Emily in a hug. They offered us their guest room without hesitation. "Stay as long as you need," they said. "We'll help you get through this." In hindsight, I wonder if Mike and Karen regretted making that offer, or if they knew exactly what they were doing. The first few nights at their house were peaceful enough. Emily and I were exhausted, physically and emotionally, and we leaned on each other to get through it. Mike and Karen were generous, almost too much so. Mike would insist on taking me out for beers to blow off steam, and Karen was always doting on Emily, bringing her tea or offering to go shopping to replace some of her lost belongings. Then, things began to shift. It started with Emily staying up late with Mike. I'd head to bed early most nights, drained from work and the stress of dealing with insurance claims. But Emily would stay downstairs with him, watching TV or chatting in the kitchen. "Mike's just trying to cheer me up," she said when I asked about it. And I believed her, because why wouldn't I? He was our neighbor, for God's sake. But the cracks started to show when I overheard them laughing late one night. Not just casual laughter, it was intimate, personal. The kind of laugh that makes you feel like you're outside looking in on something you're not supposed to see. Still, I convinced myself it was nothing. I was being paranoid, I thought. Emily had been through so much. She needed support, and Mike was just a good neighbor being kind. I told myself that over and over again, until the night I came home early from work and caught them sitting too close on the couch. Her hand was on his knee. His was on her lower back. I stood frozen in the doorway, my briefcase slipping from my hand and landing on the hardwood floor with a thud. Emily and Mike sprang apart like guilty teenagers caught red-handed. "Hey!" I said, my voice strained. "What's going on?" Mike scratched the back of his neck, trying to act casual. "Oh, hey man, just talking about, getting a contractor for you guys. For the rebuild." Emily forced a smile, her face a shade too pale. "Yeah. Mike's just been helping me figure things out." I wanted to believe them. I wanted to shrug it off and blame my own exhaustion for the way my stomach churned. But something about the way they looked at each other, like they were silently exchanging thoughts, made my blood run cold. The next few days, I became hyper-aware of every interaction between them. A touch on the arm here, a shared joke there. The way her face lit up when Mike entered the room, brighter than it had for me in months. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, until I wasn't. It was a Tuesday night when I found the first piece of evidence. Emily had left her phone charging on the kitchen counter, and a message lit up the screen as I walked by. It was from Mike. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You looked amazing." I stared at the message, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. My hands shook as I unlocked her phone. She didn't bother changing the passcode, trusting fool that I was. What I found made my world tilt on its axis. Messages. Dozens of them. Photos. Flirty exchanges. Plans to meet up when Karen and I weren't around. My throat tightened as I read them, the words blurring together into a grotesque betrayal. I confronted her that night. Emily tried to deny it at first, claiming the messages were harmless, that nothing had happened. But when I slammed the phone down on the table, the pictures staring up at us like damning evidence in a courtroom, she broke down. "Okay, fine," she snapped, tears streaming down her face. "It's not what you think. It's complicated." "Complicated," I shouted. "You're sleeping with the man who gave us a roof over our heads. How much more straightforward does it get?" Her excuses were a jumbled mess of half-truths. She was lonely. She felt neglected. Mike made her feel wanted. I listened in stunned silence, my mind reeling, until one particular sentence hit me like a truck. "It's not just Mike," she whispered. I blinked, unsure I'd heard her right. "What do you mean, it's not just Mike?" Emily looked away, ashamed, and that's when it all came crashing down. Not only had she been sneaking around with Mike, but his son, his 19-year-old son, Jake, was involved too. "Jake was just there for me," she stammered. "It wasn't planned. It just happened. Just happened." My voice cracked, the words roaring out of me. "You're telling me you slept with Mike and his kid? What the hell is wrong with you?" Emily broke down sobbing, but I felt nothing but cold, seething rage. She begged me to understand, to forgive her, but all I could see was red. It wasn't just the infidelity. It was the sheer disrespect, the way she destroyed every ounce of trust one had in her. And to make it worse, she dragged not one, but two people into her betrayal. I spent the night in my car, unable to stomach being in the same house as her. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what I just uncovered. But the more I thought about it, the clearer one thing became. This wasn't something I could forgive. The next morning, I walked into the house with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Emily was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes puffy and red from crying all night. She looked up at me, hopeful, but I didn't bother with small talk. "I want you out," I said flatly. Her face crumpled. "You don't mean that. We can fix this." "Fix this?" I laughed bitterly. "You didn't just cross a line, Emily. You burned the whole damn map. There's nothing left to fix." Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. I already knew who it was. Mike stood on the porch, his face a mix of guilt and defiance. "Hey man, can we talk?" "Yeah, we can talk," I said, stepping aside to let him in. Emily looked between us, panicked. "But we're going to do it with Karen." The color drained from Mike's face. "Wait, what?" I gestured to the living room, where Karen was already sitting, her expression a mask of confusion and concern. I'd called her an hour earlier, asking her to come over because I had something important to discuss. "Mike," I said, turning to him, "why don't you tell Karen what you've been up to with my wife?" Karen's eyes widened. "What's he talking about?" Mike stammered. "It's not what it looks like." Don't bother," I interrupted, tossing Emily's phone onto the coffee table. "I've got all the proof right here. Texts, photos, everything." Karen grabbed the phone and started scrolling, her face growing darker with every passing second. "You son of a—" Her voice broke as she looked up at Mike, tears streaming down her cheeks. "How could you do this to me? To us?" Mike opened his mouth, but no words came out. Emily tried to intervene, but Karen wasn't having it. "Don't you dare," she snapped, her voice shaking. "You're just as disgusting as he is." As the chaos unfolded in the living room, I wasn't finished. "By the way, Karen, your son isn't innocent in all this either." Karen froze. "Jake? What about Jake?" I took a deep breath. Emily wasn't just cheating with Mike. She was also involved with Jake. The room went dead silent. Karen's jaw dropped, and Mike's face turned an alarming shade of red. "What the hell are you talking about?" he roared. "You heard me," I said coldly. "Ask your son if you don't believe me. I found the messages between them too." Karen stood up, trembling with rage. This is insane. How could you? How could all of you do this?" She grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Mike ran after her, yelling, but I stayed behind, turning my attention back to Emily. "You should start packing," I said. "You're not staying here anymore." Emily tried to plead with me, but I wasn't listening. I'd already made up my mind. I contacted a divorce lawyer that morning, and I was ready to start the process. As far as I was concerned, our marriage had died the moment she decided to betray me with not one, but two members of the same family. Over the next few weeks, everything unraveled. Karen kicked Mike out, and rumors spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Jake left town, too ashamed to face anyone. And Emily? She moved in with a friend, but not before begging me one last time to take her back. "You'll regret this," she said as she stood on the porch, suitcase in hand. You'll see. You're throwing away everything we built. I just shook my head.
No, Emily.
You threw it away. As I watched her walk down the driveway for the last time, I felt a strange sense of peace. The betrayal had cut deep, but it hadn't broken me. And as the weeks turned into months, I realized something. Losing Emily wasn't the tragedy I thought it was. It was the beginning of something better.